Art is the most intense mode of individualism that the world has known. Oscar Wilde. The Horizon franchise takes place in the post-apocalypse. And in this post-apocalyptic setting, we are introduced to the Zeniths, a group of people who fled Earth during its extinction event and through a combination of pharmaceuticals and other technology managed to become functionally immortal. Now, these people were not the best and brightest that the Earth had to offer. They weren't the most capable in any way, shape, or form. They were, in plain terms, the richest. The Zeniths had no more qualities that would guarantee their survival ahead of any other human aside from the fact that they had the resources to buy their salvation. And we find out as much upon our first interaction with them. They're pompous, they're arrogant, they're callous, they hold no regard for the modern day human and believe themselves superior. And on top of all of that, they are incredibly incompetent. Indeed, the more you interact with the Zeniths, the less imposing they become. Because sure, they have technology which gives them a huge advantage, but they didn't invent that tech themselves, they're just relying on it in order to survive. When it comes down to qualities that they alone possess, they fall short in every metric. And then you meet Tilda, and she kind of defies the standards that the rest of the Zeniths have set. She shows compassion, care, empathy, even for those outside of her current social group. And on top of that, she shows the ability to think, to strategize, the ability to perceive those outside of herself, something that all of the other Zeniths up to this point have been incapable of. But it's all a trick. Sure, she displays the ability to say these things, the ability to display some kind of empathy or emotion or care, but deep down inside, she still perceives the world just like the rest of the Zeniths. She still thinks of the modern day people as her lessers, not as her peers. And I wanted to highlight one scene in particular because I feel as though it gives us such a huge insight into both her character and the Zeniths as a whole, so I wanted to kind of explore it here. So, to set the stage for this scene, Tilda has just defected from the Zeniths in order to save Aloy from a near-death encounter. When Aloy wakes up, she finds herself in a bunker that is holding various forms of artwork, and she converses with Tilda as they explore what these pieces of art mean. And I think it's through that exploration of art and their meaning that we learn so much about Tilda, because not only does art reveal more about the artist, but it reveals a lot about the person observing it, and I think that's key to her character. During this scene, they look at Woman Reading a Letter by Meer, Selene and Endymion by Gerard de Laresse, Jeremiah Mourning the Destruction of Jerusalem, Titus as a Monk, and The Night Watch by Rembrandt, The Gust by William van de Velde, and Van Vianen's Lidded Ewer. So I think it's best to go through each of these in order. I'll put a little timeline thing on the bottom so you can skip to whatever work you're interested in. I'll start off with showing Tilda's thoughts on each of them, and then I'll show what I think that means about her. Up first, we have Tilda's thoughts on Woman Reading a Letter by Meer.
My favorite pairing on the left is Woman Reading a Letter by Meer, a true master. And on the right is a forgery, Woman Reading Music, which fooled experts into believing it was a priceless original. Early in my career, I became fascinated with such deceptions. Eventually, I developed scanning software that could detect fakes with unparalleled accuracy.
Is that how you made enough money to buy your way onto the Odyssey?
Oh no. I made my real fortune later.
I find this comparison of Woman Reading a Letter to Woman Reading Music very interesting, and I find it equally as interesting that Tilda decided to display them next to each other, because while Woman Reading a Letter is by Meer, Woman Reading Music is by Van Meegeren. Now, Van Meegeren is actually a very interesting figure. He was known as a master forger because he produced over a dozen works that confused art critics and civilians alike into believing that they were priceless originals. Though they are forgeries, observing them in a technical manner actually reveals how impressive they are, because on top of needing to emulate the artist's original style and maintain all of that quality throughout the entire work, von Meegeren had to find a way in order to age the paintings to make them appear centuries older than they actually were. And here, by choosing to frame both paintings side by side, Tilda is kind of placing an emphasis on the fact that she views both of them highly, regardless of the fact that one of them is a forgery and one of them is the quote-unquote original. She still views them as equally important. In my eyes, I think that Tilda is using the Vermeer and the von Meegeren to make an allegory to Elizabeth Sobeck and Aloy. While Elizabeth was the original and Aloy the clone, Tilda still loves them both equally, and that kind of foreshadows her trying to kidnap Aloy by the end of the game because of her harbored feelings for Elizabeth. But, and I think this is quite important, Tilda never actually names von Meegeren here. She just lists off the works as a Vermeer and a copy of a Vermeer. And I think that's how she views Elizabeth and Aloy, right? She doesn't view Aloy as her own person, and neither does she view Beta as her own person. She only sees them as extensions of Elizabeth Sobeck. Tilda feels immense guilt for abandoning Elizabeth Sobeck on a planet that was doomed to die, and so now she's trying to make up for it by helping Aloy. But as we go more and more through her help, we realize that she's not actually trying to help Aloy, but instead trying to retroactively help Elizabeth, and she just hasn't registered that Aloy is her own person yet. Next up, we have Selene and Endymion by Gerard de Laresse, and I'll just play what Tilda has to say here.
Selene and Endymion. She's the goddess of the moon, whereas he's a simple shepherd. Beside her is the god of love, Cupid.
So she's sneaking up on him?
More like visiting him in secret. The torch that Cupid bears represents Selene's undying infatuation with him. Though the two must remain apart, her love will forever burn.
The story of Selene and Endymion could be interpreted in multiple ways depending on which version of it you hear. Selene, the goddess of the moon, falls in love with Endymion, a mortal man, and she visits him every night as the moon passes over. In some versions of the story, Selene asks Zeus to put Endymion into an eternal, unaging slumber so that she can gaze upon him every single night. In other versions of the story, it is Endymion who asks Zeus to be put into an eternal, unaging slumber. And sometimes Zeus is just straight up punishing Endymion for falling in love with a god. That's just how it is. Sometimes Zeus is like that. And I think which version of the story you subscribe to could really affect how you will interpret Gerard de Laresse's painting here. Because as we can see, Aloy sees it as stalking versus Tilda, who sees it as romantic. So in this instance, Tilda sees herself as Selene, an independent observer who is not able to actually interact with the one that she loves. And Endymion, the one that she loves, would be Elizabeth Sobeck in this instance. The wish to Zeus to put Endymion into an eternal, unaging slumber would be the cloning process that brought about Aloy. This is further corroborated by the fact that in her act of love, Tilda becomes the final boss, literally trying to forcefully drag Aloy off of the planet so that they can be together. Again, not because she's in love with Aloy, but because she was in love with Elizabeth Sobeck, and Aloy is just the next closest thing. Up next are the three Rembrandts, the first of which is Jeremiah mourning the destruction of Jerusalem.
This is Rembrandt painting Jeremiah, a man in mourning.
Mourning what?
His home. The ancient city of Jerusalem. He foresaw its impending doom, but could do nothing to prevent it. So instead, he saved its treasures from destruction, just as I saved these works. You could say we're kindred spirits.
I find this comparison that Tilda draws here between her and Jeremiah incredibly funny, because while Jeremiah actually tried to warn people about the destruction of Jerusalem, she just straight up bailed on humanity the moment there was the slightest inconvenience. And it shows how self-involved Tilda has become, because she is painting herself somehow as the hero of this story for preserving these artworks after all of humanity had been destroyed. But there were actual heroes when the apocalypse was happening who were fighting back against the machines, both through Operation Enduring Victory and Operation Zero Dawn. In fact, Tilda and the rest of the Far Zenith crew were actively hacking the Zero Dawn project in order to obtain a copy of Apollo so that they could live in comfort after they had completely bailed on humanity. Tilda attempting to construe herself here as a hero is a coping mechanism over the sheer amount of guilt that she feels for abandoning humanity and abandoning the one that she loved. And you have to wonder how long Tilda has been making this kind of comparison between her and other historical figures to try and construe herself as a good person, because obviously she knows Aloy will not get this reference, and so there's no way she'll argue back against her, but like, this comparison is just not warranted. Next up we have Titus as a monk, also by Rembrandt.
A portrait of the painter, Rembrandt's son Titus, depicted in the habit of a monk.
I don't get it. Why would someone like you, with infinite resources, care about this painting of a boy in a hood?
It's not the image itself, but the feeling it conveys. The face is bright and defined, but his eyes are downcast, heavy with misfortune. And the background seems to swallow all light. The painting is infused with a sense of loss.
I guess I understand how the painter feels.
Now, Tilda is actually correct here about Rembrandt's ability to evoke an emotional response through his artwork. In fact, one of his most identifying qualities is his ability to convey emotions through his art. Now, one thing that stood out to me in her analysis was the fact that she decided here specifically to focus on the technicality of his artwork, whereas with all of the other paintings, she specifically talked about the meaning behind them. Rembrandt painted his son in various different circumstances in various different outfits, and was quite close with his son as well as the last remaining child from his first wife. I am 100% sure there is a connection she could have drawn here between her and Aloy, or her and Elizabeth, or maybe even just her and humanity, but instead she decided to focus on the technicality of his art instead of the meaning, and I wonder why that is. Rembrandt has made numerous different pieces, all focused on a multitude of different people, each meant to convey various emotions, but Tilda specifically chose this piece with somebody who was directly connected to Rembrandt looking downtrodden. I mean, it could be nothing, but I think there's a reason why she decided to talk about art for art's sake here when she was literally talking about meaning everywhere else. The final of the three paintings from Rembrandt we have is The Night Watch.
Rembrandt's The Night Watch, by far the most famous painting my homeland ever produced. It was commissioned to honor a militia made up of influential citizens.
I guess you must have been an influential citizen.
In my day. But not as influential as you've been in this new world.
A little fun fact about this painting, did you know that the Night Watch doesn't actually take place at night, nor was it titled The Night Watch by Rembrandt himself? Despite being painted in the mid-17th century, the title of The Night Watch didn't happen until the 18th century. The reason for the darkened look that gives the appearance as though they are standing outside at night is because of nearly a century's worth of wear and tear as well as grime and dirt affecting the oil painting. So yeah, fun fact over, now back to Tilda. Once again, it just seems like Tilda is trying to maintain her innocence by keeping the description vague. Because sure, Aloy knows what a militia is, but she might not know what a night watch is, and if she were to learn about specifically who these people were and what they were defending, she would definitely draw the analogy between them and the people fighting for Operation Enduring Victory. Definitely not for Tilda. And once again, when Tilda says not as important as you were in this modern era, she could be talking about Aloy or Elizabeth, because the fact that these people exist in the modern era in the first place is because of Elizabeth, but Aloy has also stopped Hades and is working to recreate Gaia. Now, the final painting that we have here is The Gust by Willem van de Velde.
The Gust, by Willem van de Velde, the most famous of his many maritime paintings.
A ship crossing into the unknown. I guess you're familiar with that.
Indeed, which is why I appreciate this composition in particular. Though waves and wind threaten to destroy the ship, it perseveres, clinging to the light even as darkness closes in all around it.
The Gust is especially well known for being a very terrifyingly accurate depiction of traveling on open waters. And even though the water only takes up a small portion of the canvas itself, Van de Velde was able to use it to convey a sense of terrifying uncertainty. And Tilda is using this uncertainty as a representation of her own uncertainty as she traveled into space, leaving Earth behind and going into the unknown. This uncertainty could also be extended to Elizabeth Sobeck, as she was exclusively concerned with the well-being of humanity, and even though Far Zenith screwed her over multiple times, they were still another avenue through which humanity could survive. If you extend this logic to the painting itself, Tilda and the Far Zenith crew would be on the boat, but we as humans on Earth would be the observer, the one who actually sees them. The painting is shown from our perspective, and Tilda is imagining herself on the ship. That makes it even more disappointing that one of the first things that Far Zenith actually did was pretend as though their vessel had crashed in order to make it seem that their project had failed. This was because on the off chance that Elizabeth Sobeck actually managed to bring humanity back from the brink, those humans would eventually go searching for the ones who went to the stars, and this Far Zenith crew did not want that. Now, this was an analysis that we could make at this point in time given the knowledge we had at this point in the game. However, coming with the knowledge that we have now, we know that none of the Zeniths actually planned on staying on Earth, and they all planned on leaving at some point. Whether that's Tilda, Gerard, Eric, or Walter Landra, none of them were actually concerned with the safety or well-being of Earth, and they were all just trying to show up to steal a copy of Gaia and then dip once again. Armed with future knowledge, we can look at the reservations that Tilda is expressing through this painting, not as reservations of the past, but of reservations of the future. The first time the Zeniths left Earth, they had a destination in mind, Sirius, and they also had a route chartered in order to get there. This time they are trying to leave Earth, it is a much more rushed decision with far less planning going into it, as they are literally being hunted across the universe by a malevolent AI that wants to kill them. And I think it's this future trip into space that Tilda is expressing so much uncertainty about, because she is just afraid in general. She's being hunted, she's being chased, and she doesn't know where she's going to end up, but she knows it will be a rushed decision, and she is very much someone who likes to plan, so everything being so impromptu is making her scared. And last but not least, we have the only non-painting on this list, Van Vianen's Lidded Ewer.
Stunning, isn't it? Paintings were the only masterpieces of my people's golden age. This is Van Vianen's Lidded Ewer, molded from a single sheet of silver.
What was it for?
How like Elizabeth you are. Function over form. Its practical purpose was less important than its meaning. Van Vianen created it in honor of his late brother, who himself was a famous silversmith.
A memorial.
Yes. Such beauty from sorrow.
Function versus form, nature versus nurture. This is something that Horizon Forbidden West has tackled quite heavily through the lens of Aloy and Beta. Two clones of Elizabeth Sobeck who ended up completely different from one another despite having literally the exact same DNA. Now, what's interesting here is that Tilda has obviously taken the form side of the argument. She prioritizes form over function, and I think that's what allows her to see Aloy as a substitute for Elizabeth Sobeck. She sees the form, she sees that they look the same and that they sound the same and that they literally have the exact same DNA, and that allows her to see Aloy as Elizabeth. What is interesting here is that despite taking the form side of the argument, it's very clear that Tilda has not disregarded the function side either, because she still fell in love with Aloy and not Beta. It turns out that looking and sounding like the one that you love wasn't enough. Aloy had to act like Elizabeth in order for Tilda to make that connection, because Beta is timid, right? She does not like head-on confrontation, and she feels very adverse to social interactions, very much the opposite of Elizabeth Sobeck, and that's why Tilda did not view her in the same light that she does Aloy or Elizabeth. And we see this inclination towards both in Tilda's description of the Van Vianen piece. She directs Aloy to look at the craftsmanship and look at the different pieces, talk about how impressive it is that it's made of one sheet of silver, which is impressive. But at the same time, she also emphasizes that it is meant as a memorial. The function is still brought up even if it's superseded by the form, because Tilda is taking both in mind. When I first played Horizon Forbidden West, I thought Tilda was far different from the rest of the Zenith crew that we had met so far, but it was this scene that really tied her down to that moniker of Zenith for me, because it seemed as though she had such an attachment to art over that of human lives. But upon reevaluation of this scene, I don't think this is the particular moment when that part of Tilda is revealed. I think it's the next part where she talks to Aloy about her plan for dealing with Regala. Instead here, I think that Tilda is making a confession to Aloy, at least to herself in some way, shape, or form. This scene is Tilda trying to convince Aloy to leave Earth behind. The scene is Tilda trying to make a confession to Aloy. This scene is Tilda in some way, shape, or form trying to resonate with Aloy on a deeper level than just the person who saved me. And it's quite tragic that both Aloy and the player are not able to understand what Tilda is saying to her at this moment. Aloy because she doesn't have the historical knowledge to even know what these pieces mean, and us the player because we have no idea what Tilda's true intentions are. And despite the lower amount of screen time that Tilda received, I still think that it's scenes like this that allow her character to really shine. And that's pretty much all I have to say about her. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I plan on doing more character analysis like this about plenty of different Horizon characters, because if you didn't know, Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West are my favorite games of all time. I love the characters, I love the world and the combat, and I really just want to spread this around to more people. So be on the lookout for that, and thank you for watching.